Welcome to a Sunday morning. Minnesota St. Louis are on, but scoreless after one. I don't have anything to report on that. So I thought, hey, I know what I'll do. I'm going to grab the. I knew I was missing one. I thought, I'm going to end up missing one because it's kind of what I do. And of course, if I'm going to miss one, it's going to be the one that I'm starting with because I'm going to go in alphabetical order. Of course, I missed that one. We're about the quarter point, past the quarter point for some teams, not quite there for others, but for most, we're at 16 games played, which is about the quarter point of the season. Well, 20% into the season. The quarter point is technically 20 games, right? Well, 20 and a quarter of a game. So 16 games into the season for most teams. Some it's over, some it's under. Let's just go ahead and grade them. Go ahead and do the grading. And I'd be interested to know your grades for everybody in the comment section below, of course. This is highly unscientific. I'm just going by what we had expected versus what we've got. From Anaheim, for me, they get a D because it's been abysmal for the most part. They had a really solid start, but the numbers, the shots for and against, showed it really wasn't something that they'd be able to maintain, and it hasn't been. Arizona, I'll give them a solid B. They weren't expected to be a playoff team, and right now they're not in the playoffs, just for the record. But the potential is there, and they've looked pretty solid after a pretty poor start. So I'll give them a B. Boston, I'm also giving Boston a B. They've had their good moments, their bad moments. There have been games where it's obvious if you shut down their first line, they don't have a whole lot else to throw at you, but they've still won their share. They're still one of the better teams in their division. We'll see if that continues. Buffalo, also going with a B for Buffalo. Not because these teams start with B, of course. I'm not that simple. But because Buffalo has had their excellent moments. They look like they could be in the playoffs this year, but they've also had games where they've looked really bad. And there's been that in between for them. So B, which means they're above. That's a good grade if you're in school, right? Calgary, I'm going ahead and throwing an A up here for Calgary, and I'll tell you why. The fact that they're 10-6-1 and they've got a goaltender who has an 872 save percentage, that's insane. I understand Riddick's had a better record than Smith, but the fact that Smith has any wins with some of the save totals he's been putting up in some of those games, yeah, I'm giving the Flames an A, and there wasn't a whole lot expected from them this year, and they've exceeded expectations. Carolina, I'm going to go with a C for Carolina. I'm going to avoid pluses or minuses. I thought about a C minus, but I'll go with a C. They're getting a lot of shots from all over the ice. The results still aren't there. I had thought about taking the overtime losses and making them regular losses to point out that, yes, there are teams that have lost more games than they've won, but the way that the NHL sets this up, it's so that everybody looks like they're winners. And they're not all winners. And for Carolina, it's been a great start, followed by a kind of a mucky period of time here. Chicago, they had an excellent start to the season, but it didn't look sustainable. Their first 5 games go to overtime, and that tells you that they're not finishing games in regulation. That means there's a problem there. And sure enough, they've gone on a losing streak of 7. They've had to fire their coach. And again, I've heard rumblings about there being problems in the Chicago locker room going back to last season. And whether we agree or disagree, the idea was that getting Quenneville out of there might get that out of the locker room. So I still give them a D. I understand there's going to be people who say, well, they just don't have this and that. They can't compete. Okay. I look at the result and I say, you know what, they were supposed to be better than this according to a lot of their own fans. And according to the team, who said at the end of last year that it wasn't acceptable, the result they had, and now they kind of look worse than they did last year. Colorado, I'm going with a C. And that's a tough grade to give them because I think they've played well and I think they should be a playoff team. But they do need more depth scoring to get there. They need a more consistent effort every game, and they've got to watch that road record because that was what did them in last year. and ended up making it. So they had to wait till game 82 before they made it. So I'll give them a C based on they've had some good results. They've lost some games against some of the best teams in the league, but you can look at that and say they've been exposed as not being one of the better teams in the league. So it depends how you look at it. Columbus 9-6-2. I'm going to be rough on them. I'm going to give them a C because of how inconsistent they've been. It's been a rough go for Columbus, a team that with Bobrovsky and Panarin both on expiring contracts may have to win this year or they're not going to win. I'll give them a C on that one. Dallas, they're also 9-6-2, missing a lot of guys. I'll give them a B, but I want to give them a C, and yet they've played well. They've had their moments. I understand they have the same record as Columbus. Columbus made the playoffs last year. Dallas did not. I think Dallas has looked better in recent games than necessarily has Columbus, although I understand Columbus is first in their division because the Metro it's a heck of a division right now, isn't it? It's really hard to predict who's going to win that one. Dallas, it's a grade that will get dropped if the next quarter isn't better than this quarter's been so far. And it is something that I agonize on. I'm leaning towards a B or a C for them. So I could see either being the argument. Detroit, I'm going to give them a B. Why? Because nobody expected them to be any good. I thought Detroit was going to be half decent this year. I knew that Dylan Larkin could be a superstar in this league. I knew that there were other players who underachieved last year, and that they went on this massive slide after the trade deadline that made their record look a heck of a lot worse than what it probably would have been had they not sold at the deadline and the players started to, take that nosedive. I think they're a better team than they get credit for. I do. There's a lot of energy with this team, a lot of youth now. The turnaround for Detroit could be a lot quicker than we'd imagine. The Oilers. A C for the Oilers at 8-7-1. This has been a rough go. They went on a losing streak this past week. Before that, they looked pretty solid, but the consistency's not there. And I know Oiler fans get mad at me for saying it, but it's not just me saying it. McDavid does factor into a ton of the Oilers' goals. When you look at the percentage, it's usually between 40 and 50% of their goals involve McDavid, so that's too high. And really, honestly, that's all it takes for the Oilers. Is just if you can cover Connor and shut him down, odds are you're probably going to win the game. And that's a tough thing for them to overcome, and thus they give them a C. Florida, I'm going to give Florida really tough love on this. I know they've had a few good games recently, but man, they weren't ready for when Luongo was out to start the season. And it was a rough start to the season, and now they got to dig their way out of a hole again. It's been a number of seasons where that's happened. And I'm not going to put all of it on Reimer. It's not just Reimer that was a problem. So I'm going to give them a D based on what my expectations and expectations of a lot of pundits were before this season. This was supposed to be a different season. This grade is likely going to come up in future weeks. But Florida, again, every time I get my hopes up with the Panthers, they tend to sort of let me down. I'm looking at you, Dallas. You're not the only team that does it. And there are a number of Florida Panthers that played in Dallas. So it makes sense that it's the same guys kind of doing the same thing. But Florida, I know, that's tough love. I could have given them a C, but it's tough love. LA, it's a D for me with LA. You know their best player's been Kovalchuk, right? So when I see people say, they signed Kovalchuk, what losers. Yeah, without Kovalchuk, they probably would have won 2 games instead of 5. This has been quite the run, and the Kings definitely look like they need something. Last night behind the bench, Willie Desjardins kind of not looking very happy, and it takes a lot for him to get that upset behind the bench. But I guess these Kings have got him there a lot faster than the Canucks did. Minnesota, who are playing currently against St. Louis, I'm going to go ahead and give Minnesota and their 10-4-2 record an A. This has been an amazing start. 22 points in their first 16 games. They're on pace for 110 points this year. I don't think they end up there, but you know what? None of us expected this either. There are some wild faithful who are saying, well, we did. I get that. But this has been one heck of a run for Minnesota. And the praise that they've earned, they definitely deserve every moment of it. Montreal at 9-5-3. I'm also giving Montreal an A. I'm giving them an A for two reasons. One, everybody they've acquired has excelled. And two, they've done it while Carey Price has not been at his best. This is a combination that I didn't see coming. I don't think anybody did. And, that because for Montreal fans during the summer were saying, well, we're going to be good. A lot of it was Price is the best goalie in the league, and we've got these new guys now, so the combination is going to make us one of the better teams. Well, Price hasn't been one of the best goalies in the league so far this year, and they're still playing very well. Antti Niemi getting a win last night. So this is it's bizarro world, but I'll give Montreal an A. Nashville, I can't give Nashville anything below an A. They came through an injury to Pekka Rinne with barely a scratch. They managed to win games no matter who's in net. If they have to score a bunch of goals, they do. If it's a tight checking, low scoring game, they can win that one too. There's a lot of depth here. This team wants the Stanley Cup. I'm not saying they're going to win it, but they're doing their best to get there. New Jersey. Oh, it's hard not to give them a D. They're 30th in the NHL right now. 30th. They were 4-0 and they've been 2-7-1 since then. It has been a disaster. Their goaltending is starting to look... I like Kincaid a lot, but he's started to look like the Kincaid I was arguing in favor of last year when he didn't have very good stats. Their defense needs some work, and they're having trouble. They're struggling. If you look at it another way, they won the 2 games overseas, so they've only won 4 games in North America. They're 4-7-1 in North America, so it's been a tough slog for them. And in a year where you can see them getting clawed back because there's so many young players, but still, I can't let them off the hook and say, well, their letter grade's going to be a B because look how young they are. That's not how it works. The Islanders. A nice B for the Islanders in that we had, again, left them for dead, much like Detroit, for instance, or Buffalo, or Arizona, and they've been competitive. And right now, the New York Islanders, I checked when I did this, they're 15th overall in the NHL, which is higher than anybody had expected. And how much fun would it be if it was Washington and the Islanders in the playoffs? Or how interesting would it be if the Islanders made the playoffs and the Capitals didn't? Or the Islanders and Toronto in the playoffs. There are a lot of things that could happen with the Islanders this year that could make things very, very interesting going forward. And thanks to, I think, Barry Trotz and Lou Lamoriello for having a vision, a plan, and a structure, they're in a position to actually challenge for that. The Rangers. Solid B for me with the Rangers. Rebuilding or not, they are not throwing in the towel at this stage of the game. Again, though, look how many teams are above 500 or at 500. How many teams are actually... You just divert here for a second. How many teams are below 500? Anaheim, Chicago, Detroit, LA, New Jersey, and Vegas. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In a team of 31 in a league of 31 teams, only 6 have a losing record. And that's why we have 3-point games. All right, but back to the Rangers. They've overcome a slow start. They've played very well. Lundqvist looks like Lundqvist again. And Zibanejad is playing some excellent hockey right now. And their defense is better than advertised. So definitely a B for them. The Ottawa Senators, you know what? I'm going to give them an A. And I'm going to explain why I'm giving them an A. Their penalty kill's terrible. They've gone through the whole Ubergate. They lost Carlson. They lost Hoffman. They're a tire fire. Their owner said they're a dumpster fire. They have been basically told, yeah, you're a dead team walking. And they're 7-7-3. Now, we had all expected an absolute disaster of a season this year. And Duchesne has played well. Chabot's been fantastic. Anderson's faced a ton of rubber. And somehow, they are still, while not a playoff team, they're at least in that conversation. We had all expected them to be basically with a record like LA has right now. This is what we had expected for the Ottawa Senators. Last night, they go into Tampa, and they even their record with a win over Tampa. So I cannot justify giving them a lower grade because of everything that they've overcome and the fact that they're still working hard every night to prove they're this year's Vegas. And I mean that. It's a sloppier Vegas. It's they don't have the record that Vegas had last year, but this is a team that is basically misfits. You look at the number of guys in that Ottawa roster that were sent out by San Jose, discarded by Colorado in Duchesne's case. These guys are all written off as losers, overrated, overpaid in Bobby Ryan's case. They're not good enough. This team is just a team of absolute bums, and yet they haven't played like it. Philly, I'm going to give them a B, and I know that's going to drive Flyers fans nuts, but they had an excellent road trip, and they seem to have maintained some of that momentum. We'll see tonight if they've really maintained it. But the fact that they have a 9-7-1 record with some of the goaltending numbers they had early in the season, that's impressive. So I'm going to go ahead and give them a B. Pittsburgh, C. Very, very, very uneven record. They've just come out of I believe it was a 4 or 5 game losing streak. They broke that last night with a win over Arizona. But it's been a tough slog, and Jim Rutherford's come out and said it hasn't been good enough, and he's ready to make changes. We'll see what he does. I don't think there's going to be any major change in Pittsburgh. I don't. Part of the problem, when Chicago goes through this, LA goes through this, when you've won multiple cups, you really don't want to tear apart that core. I mean, you talk about it, but you don't really do it. So then you end up with records like LA and Chicago because you decided not to jettison any of that core when you probably should. So is Pittsburgh in a spot right now where they probably should make a major change? Oh, absolutely. And if this was the 80s or 90s when trading was a heck of a lot more prevalent, they would have done it by now. I miss those days sometimes, I really do, because, yeah, trading was a lot more liberal in the 80s. You had your definite haves, your definite have-nots, and the have-nots knew they were have-nots, and they would sell off their good players to a team like Pittsburgh, who was trying to get back to a Stanley Cup, and they'd take back young assets in return, and maybe a couple crappy assets as well, and that's not possible in today's NHL. That's completely changed. That's gone for good. On the San Jose side of things, C. Some nights I watch a San Jose game and I'll say, well, now they're on the path, they're getting better. And other nights I'm like, they're not getting better. This is not improving. This is bad. And the 4-0 loss they had against St. Louis was one of those ones that I said, wow, this is pretty awful. So we'll see if San Jose can improve that grade, but they don't even look like a playoff team some nights right now, which is weird because you would think that with Karlsson on the blue line, we haven't really noticed Karlsson on the blue line. You know what's funny is there was a lot of talk about Karlsson going to the Canucks in the offseason. I'm kind of glad he didn't. Canucks would have had to give up a ton of assets to get him. Who knows? Maybe they wouldn't have the record they have right now if they'd gone out and got Karlsson. Although, with the kind of hockey Canucks are playing and all these goals all over the place, that probably would suit Karlsson's game, and he might have better totals in Vancouver than he's got in San Jose. Hindsight's 2020. St. Louis. I'll give them a C based on the fact that their recent play has got them back above 500, but they're shockingly close to a D. Again, I didn't put pluses or minuses. I'm just going to go with just the A through D. There's no E's or F's, obviously. It's a tough grade for St. Louis. Part of what doesn't help is they've played 14 games. Some of these teams played 16, 17, or 18. So there's still a lot of room there for them to get better. Today they're playing Minnesota. If they can beat Minnesota in regulation, that definitely helps. But again, you can't just bet on that. So I give them a C. It's an average, yeah, I guess. We had expected more, though. I admit we expected more. For teams that are doing exactly what they should or who are exceeding that, I'm going with a B on those. C means you probably could improve. Probably drag that up a bit. Tampa. I can't not give Tampa an A, and that includes the 6-4 loss last night against the Ottawa Senators. Tampa's been Tampa. This looks like the same team last year, regular season team last year, not the the team that faced the Washington Capitals in Games 6 and 7 of last year's conference finals, and sadly, that's what they're wearing right now. I think that's part of the reason why their record is so solid. I think Tampa realizes just how embarrassed they were last year at the end of it, and they want revenge for that. They want vengeance, so they seem to be steaming towards the Eastern Conference Championship, Nashville, the Western Conference Championship, at least of the regular season, and then we'll see where things go in the playoffs. Toronto, I'd love to give them an A. I'm giving them a B. I will give them an A for the fact they've done a lot of this without Austin Matthews. I would give them an A for that, and yet they had their struggles with Matthews in the lineup at home. They've overcome that. I'm giving them a B because I think they're exactly kind of where we'd expect them to end up. They're 5 games above 500, 17 games into the season, so they're on pace for about 103 or 105 points, somewhere in that range. No overtime losses for them, so this is a legit 11-6 record. And I think Toronto has done well for themselves. And the one concern we may have now is, Austin Matthews is a free agent this coming summer, restricted, of course. And is he injury prone? And I know Toronto fans don't like me saying it, but, I have to. We're into year 3 of his career, and again, he's on the shelf for an extended period of time. And will that affect the actual outcome of how much money he makes? Will that factor into it? Will the Leafs go there and say, you know what, we love what you do when you're in the lineup, but you're out of the lineup a lot, and we need to be able to make up for when you're not in the lineup. So we can't afford to pay you what you think is your market value because we don't know how long you're going to play, and we're going to have to replace you in the lineup more often than we would for, say, John Tavares. It should be interesting because it's obvious with Kyle Dubas, he's willing to play hardball. Look at Nylander. We're less than 3 weeks out now from Nylander potentially not playing in the NHL at all this year. The fact they're 11-6 without Nylander, it's pretty impressive too. But I'm gonna hold with the B. Vancouver, it's an A. It's a Pettersson A. Without Elias Pettersson, there's no way they have a 10-6-2 record. That being said, can Pettersson keep up this pace? No. He's an excellent young forward. I don't see him as scoring 50 in his first season. I don't. He's got excellent skill, excellent talent level, but teams are going to start keying on him. Now that he had those 10 goals in his first 10 games in the NHL, teams are going to start keying on him, and it's going to get a lot more difficult. Where keeping this A is going to be important for the Canucks is the play of Bo Horvat, the play of guys like Virtanen, and everybody laughed about my video on Virtanen over the summer where I said, he could have a breakthrough year. Well, he's now got 7 goals in 18 games. So he's playing well. He's on pace for 30 goals this year. And if he gets 30 goals, even if it's with 9 or 10 assists, I'll qualify that as a breakout season. Because right now he only has 2 assists. But, Vancouver, it's been an amazing run considering their goaltending numbers haven't been great. Their defense is still not fantastic. It's not. It's not a blue line you can look at and say, well, if the Canucks needed to improve something, they could trade X defenseman off and reasonably expect to get back a really good return. I'm not sure that there's any blue liner for the Canucks right now that if they went to trade him, that a team would give up a whole lot for him. But as a collective group, they've played well. They have. Props to Stetcher on that. Vegas. If I could give an E anywhere, it would be to Vegas. The E would be for expansion, however. This is the kind of season we were expecting with Vegas last year. Vegas is 7-9-1. And this is kind of where we expected Vegas to be last year. And at this time last year, I kept saying, eventually this is going to slow down because this is their first year. They have a lot of good players. They don't have a lot of great players. And this is why when George McPhee was throwing all this money at all these guys from last year, I was like, okay, I get it, but you're going to want to improve the team, and you're going to want to have enough cap space after to improve the team, right? I don't know that Vegas has enough cap space to improve the team after this season. They had tons of cap space going into last year, and I was like, wow, he did a good job. They got tons of cap space, and they're doing really well. Wait, he signed that guy for how much? Okay, well, they've still got, he signed that, how much? So there's a lot of that going on, where I'm looking at these players, and starting next year, they're paying a lot of guys a lot of money, and I'm not sure that they're going to be a playoff team out of it. That's the problem. The toughest job you have as a general manager is looking at a team that's good, like say New Jersey or right now Montreal. Let's say Montreal continues on this torrid pace they've been on, and they make the playoffs. The toughest decision for Bergevin in the offseason, and Bergevin sticks around under that scenario, make all Montreal fans happy. Um, the toughest, and did you notice how a strong start suddenly makes a bad GM look good, or a good GM can look bad with a bad start, because GMs are just GMs. They, everything's a roll of the dice when you're a general manager. There is that element to it. I don't care how good or how bad they might be. But if Montreal finishes the season with a really solid record, they make the playoffs, there will be some tough decisions for Bergevin, looking at the lineup and going, okay, but which guys do I need to get rid of? And that's the difference between a team that is good and a team that excels. You look at the Chicago Blackhawks and how they won 3 Stanley Cups. Big part of the reason how they kept getting back was the cap punished them, but it also forced them to think outside the box. They got rid of some players, and they always managed to seemingly bring in the right guys that they managed to get back. The LA Kings won 2 in 3 years. They basically kept that team together, and now they're at 5-10-1. They got swept last year. They couldn't score goals against the Vegas Golden Knights. So, it's a tough slog. Vegas really got a career year out of a lot of guys last year, and it's just not happening this year. Marc-Andre Fleury is somebody mentioned yesterday in my review video, he's playing like he did in Pittsburgh. He wasn't ever a big-time Vezina, fantastic goaltender. He was a good goaltender who managed to show up for big games in the playoffs. But Pittsburgh, and the fact they could score seemingly at will a lot of the time, would cover up for mistakes made by their goaltenders. Vegas does not score at will, not this year, and we're definitely looking at a different universe for them. Washington. C for cup hangover. This has been any given night you watch Washington and you'll say, oh yeah, no, this is the team that won the Stanley Cup. Or the next night you might watch them go, is this team even a playoff team? They had a good run this past week, and we'll see if they can maintain that. And your guess is as good as mine. They got Arizona tonight, so that's an interesting test in that Arizona has overachieved at points this year, and Washington has definitely underachieved at points this year. This is a team that may very well miss the playoffs. Right now, in fact, both Pittsburgh and Washington are below 16th in the NHL's overall standings. Both of them. So the only way that they may meet in a playoff this year might be on a golf course. If they can't reverse course on this season, they may both be golfing in early April. Winnipeg at 9-5-1. I'm giving them a B. They're off to a similar start to last year. They're kind of where we expected them to be. Today they're at home against New Jersey. So that's an interesting test because New Jersey coming in with that D grade, they're going to want to improve that because I'm sure there's all kinds of hockey players out there caring about what my grade is for them. But there you go. Winnipeg, I think, has been right about where we would have expected, and they've played well. And we'll see if they maintain that. But let me know which team you think is due for a breakthrough. Which team you think is really highly graded right now that you think could potentially have problems later. Because, again, this is going to change. And I'll do this again at around the midway mark of the season because it's going to change. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.